friends. Speaking of the Psalms, it is now time for the Soulful Psalm segment of Beacon of Truth. The Soulful Psalms is we take one of the Psalms that we hear in every holy sacrifice of the Mass and we connect that Psalm to your everyday lived experience. Well, today we're continuing our reflection on the longest of all the Psalms, Psalm 119, which is an extended reflection, a meditation on the law of God. And today we're going to take a look at the vow strophe. So vow is the sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And as I said, the Psalm 119 is broken into 22 sections, about 8 verses each section. Each section is named after a letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Wow, or Vav is the sixth letter, and that's what we're taking a look at today. We're going to take a look at the second half of this psalm. We looked at the first half already. We're going to take a look at verses 45 to 48. And so the psalmist says here, I shall walk on a spacious plain, for I seek your precepts. You know how you're walking with the Lord and everything seems so big. You have so much confidence. You have the joy of the Lord. Everything just seems like there's nothing you can't conquer. There's nothing that you can't accomplish. You know, you have that awesome feeling that, yes, the Lord is with you. Everything's going right. This is the way the psalmist is expressing, because he's following the law and the precepts of God. He feels he's walking on the spacious plain. There's nothing in his way. There's nothing that can stop him. I will speak of your decrees before kings and not be abashed. Look at the confidence that he has in the love of God. Look at the confidence that he's exhibiting here because he's following the law. He will speak before kings. So we don't have to be afraid to speak to those who, even though they may be better educated than us. They may have a different level of expertise than we do. It doesn't matter. When we're not ashamed and embarrassed to witness to the power of our faith, we can profess that faith before kings and not be abashed, before those who maybe don't share our faith with us, but we're grateful to be able to share and confident to be able to share that faith with power and love and conviction. You know, I love the psalmist here reflect on the power of God's law. In your commands I have found my delight. These I have loved. Right? So the law of the Lord is not like sometimes we can't think of the law of the Lord like laws within our culture. Right? Now, laws within our culture are supposed to be what's called human or positive laws. It's taking the natural moral law and applying it to the human endeavors, human experience, to human life. You know, but sometimes there are unjust laws like abortion and euthanasia and all those. They may be legal. That doesn't make them right or moral or proper, or so-called redefinition of marriage. You know, so he said, in these commands I have found my delight. These I have loved. So God's love is not something that's heteronomous. It's not something that's imposed on us from the outside. Like sometimes the unjust laws, they're imposed upon us from the outside. So we didn't have a choice in the law. They just said, well, this is what the law is now. You have to follow it. Well, no, you know, we cannot follow an unjust law. We can't. And we have a moral duty to object to and not to follow laws that violate the natural moral law, especially when it comes to respect of human life. So marriage and gender and life, when life begins, the different issues with abortion and euthanasia and stem cell research and assisted suicide. We can't, those may be legal, but those things we cannot follow. We cannot align ourselves with those as followers of Christ. But in God's commands, we can delight because they don't impose themselves upon us from the outside. These are laws that align with the natural moral law. This is part of God's eternal law revealed through Jesus Christ, called the divine law, that touches the natural moral law that is implanted in all of our hearts from God. So God's laws already align with with who he created us to be. And in fact, God's law, when we align ourselves freely, we open our hearts to receive God's law into our lives and live freely by our own free will, not because God's coercing us or making us, but we're freely choosing to follow God's law. then that's where true freedom comes from. That enables, the psalmist said, I walked on a spacious plain. That gives us our confidence. That gives us our joy. That gives us our peace, right? That gives us our ability to become the person who God created us to be. When we align ourselves and freely give ourselves over to God's law of love and intimacy and communion, right? So the commands in your commands, I have found my delight, my joy, my peace. These I have loved, not the ways of thinking of the world, but the laws of God. These I have loved, not just followed because I had to out of a sense of obligation, but out of love, right? Out of love is why we follow God's law, because we love him, right? And then finally, I reach out to your commands, which I love, and ponder your statutes. So I reach out to your commands. I reach out with what? My heart. My heart. Remember, leb in Hebrew is heart. That's the place where your desire for God lives inside of you, right? That's where God can move you and change you and touch you and literally change your life, is in your heart. That's where we reach out. We reach out to be heart to heart with God. Heart to heart, our heart in sync and in communion with God's heart. And so that heart to heart relationship, that's what we love. And that allows us to ponder God's statutes. So how does God's love and how does God's law relate in my own life? Right? That's the beauty of the reflections on these beautiful reflections on the law of God that we see here in Psalm 119.
For more on the Psalms with Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, check out Beacon of Truth weekdays at 4 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio and streaming everywhere you listen to podcasts.